Hello, guys and girls. The program you are about to hear will be both fun and educational, but it is not a substitute for medical advice. Although we are doctors, we are not your doctors.
Hello and welcome to Travel Medicine. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood internal medicine doc, Dr. J.
Hey guys, Dr. Santhosh here, pediatric infectious disease doc, researcher.
Wait, what's that? I checked under the
Whoa.
couch and I believe I found a third host from the old days.
Yay! Oh
Hey
my
everyone, it's
god.
me, Dr. Ward. I'm back from vacation. Board certified emergency medicine physician and MacGyver.
That's right.
Yeah, back from vacation that you took, I don't know, eight years ago now, based on the last time we recorded.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean,
Hey,
I
you know
guess,
what?
It was a
yeah.
nice vacation.
I practice what I preach.
Yeah.
Vacations are an important part of one's mental and physical well-being. Until
Yeah,
it's not.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we do have the show titled Travel Medicine, but it's been a while since we've done an actual, travel related
Yeah, yeah.
episode.
We've gone metaphorically. We've gone on, like around the world in 80 plagues, but we haven't brought back tales literally from around the world.
So we reached out to our traveling emergency medical physician and asked, "What's a good story?" And Ward responded, "Well, I have a story." So, Ward, let's before we get into this week's topic, why don't you tell us about your vacation?
So it's
Oh no.
2023.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, you know what? I feel like it's time to travel internationally again. I felt, safer. I was fully vaccinated, boosted, and all that. Plus, I had COVID twice. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I feel like I haven't traveled internationally in a long time, and this is the time. And just be safe. Why not do something naturey outdoors? What can go wrong, right?
Oh, sure. This is instead of being crowded and stuck with a bunch of people with communicable diseases.
Correct. So I
Got it.
thought I was playing it safe. So my spouse and I embarked on a journey to Costa Rica. I was so looking forward to it. On the brochure they had waterfalls, they had monkeys, they had all sorts of wildlife, and I went with specifically a adventure active travel group. So these are all people of similar mindset. We wanted to get ourselves out there and do stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then, guys, I feel like my age is catching up with me, and we're all getting a little older. And your idea of adventure travel back in your 20s and 30s uh, still sounds good in our heads, but in our 40s, it's harder to execute.
And that we were at least partially aware of that when we started our adventure travel group many years ago, saying, "Let's go do all the things now that we would be too old to do in the future."
Oh, okay. So you guys were you were anticipating some aches and pains if you tried to do this later, not as much energy, not as much recovery from, your standard travelers diarrheas and flus and stuff.
Well, for example, when Ward and I jumped off mountains following birds in Nepal to go
Yeah.
parahawking, we
Okay.
figured that's something we're much more able to do in our late 20s, early 30s, and we could leave, wine tours in Italy for an era when, oh, I don't know, like your joints start to give out on you a little more.
Sure. Okay.
Middle age catches up with you. You remember just like a few years ago, people were making fun of millennials for being young and naive, and
Oh
now
yeah.
millennials are in their 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I was that millennial slash Gen Xer on a group with a group of active travelers. And most people, I would say, were a little bit younger and in better shape than I was. We started out on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica in the province of Limon, where it gets a ton of rain. And we went during the rainy season, so in the rainforest. So everything was wet.
Oh.
And Yeah, so we decided to go on a hike to some beautiful waterfalls. It's a you have to get there. There's no roads. You have to use you have to use your rafts, and this was a part rafting tour, part sightseeing tour. And then we just happened to stop by some gorgeous waterfalls, and guess what happens when it rains all the time on those rocks? Moss forms,
yeah.
and it gets super, super slippery. And then we were all taken in by the gorgeous scenery with the lush greenery. And well, I'm from Southern California, so I'm not used to seeing that much greenery and that much lush water scenery. Before you knew it, I took one step and I was on my back. That moss does not.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. A slip can happen to anyone.
Yeah. So that that's not necessarily a middle-aged thing. Okay, well, any of us can stumble, sure.
There you go. I like
Okay.
it. And then, as this was before I could react, and the creek bed or the river bed was full of pretty large rocks, and then I just happened to land right on my lumbar spine. Not the best place or the meatiest place to break or fall on a
Ooh.
rock.
So for those of us not medically literate, just a little above the buttocks, what usually a lot of us call our lower back. It's kind of like, when I'm by the stove stirring soup. And then I just kind of put my hand back there, like that's the lumbar spine, kind of a little curve while
That's
I'm
very specific.
For
stirring
those
soup.
of you who are
Yeah.
fans of hip hop, for those of you
Yeah.
fans of hip hop, my neck, my back, the region of the back likely being referred to is the
Yeah.
lumbar spine.
God.
How does that end?
Well,
My
as
neck.
opposed to the cervical spine is the neck.
Oh,
The
that's
No,
right.
the crack would be the sacral spine. Although, as anatomically ambitious as that song gets, I would have to say it lacks mention of the thoracic region.
Oh,
Also,
which
huge
is,
diss.
yeah, it kind of it's not exactly head, shoulders, knees, and toes. It's, it's aspirational, but
Right. So it's the last step of the Macarena on that area.
there, yes, yeah, before you do the little, the turn, the quarter turn, yes.
It's one of the worst places to land on. Although your cervical spine would be a slightly worse place to land on, or your
Oof.
head. And fortunately, all of us were wearing helmets. And again, water safety PSA plug: wear shoes with adequate traction when you're
Grip,
in
yeah,
situations like
mhm,
that.
yeah.
I wore some river rafting slippers, which apparently were not enough, and almost everyone fell. And one of our actually fellow travelers landed on his hand, and he broke the fingers. So
oh
Ooh,
wait,
anyway,
there's a name. There's a name for that. Oh, not the finger one, but when you fall and you put out a hand to stop yourself, it's like a classic one we learned
oh
in
yeah,
foosh.
it's
textbooks.
you break your clavicle, right? Because of that S curve, I
You can
believe
break a
so.
clavicle. You can break many things. Humpty Dumpty like was all broke. You can break your wrist. The Colles fracture is classically considered
Yeah.
a foosh injury because you
Foosh,
brace
that's
yourself.
the one.
Because that's
Fall
the
on
sound
an
you make.
yeah.
That's the sound
No.
you make is you're slipping. You go whoosh, and
No.
That's the
It's
foosh out injury.
fall onto an outstretched hand. Foosh. But you also
Yes.
do go foosh.
So I
okay,
wish I did a
so
foosh because that would have been a more tolerable injury. I landed on my like right on the lumbar spine, and I couldn't move. I could not. I found myself in a tricky situation because I was in the middle of the jungle in a remote part of Costa Rica where you could not get um, to the riverbed because you had to raft to get to that spot. And here I was able to stand, but the pain was so excruciating, I just couldn't move from that spot.
Oh no. I'm so sorry, man. That sounds horrible.
which turns dark real quick, but does bring us into this week's topic of wilderness medicine. What do you do when you are injured and with low resource? So, is this you couldn't move due to pain, or you could not even make your limbs respond? How do you
I
diagnose yourself in the moment? Which
well,
is not something that we should be doing, but
we should not be doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it does help that we are well versed in diagnosis of these specific situations. So my doctor brain did take over. I was like, okay, head to toe. Does my head feel okay? Okay, fine. My head feels all right. I can talk. I can see. I can move on my limbs. So I was like, okay, is my neck okay? Cervical spine seems okay. Good. Head, neck checked. We're off to a not bad start. And then I was like, where's my pain? The searing pain was specifically in my lumbar spine, specifically around the second lumbar so L2, L3 areas. Again, Macarena last move. That's where it was, and it's
Right.
exactly in the middle where the bone is and where the impact happened. So I was like, shoot. I fractured my spine. I was right there, and then I was like, I
Oh.
fractured my spine. Um, what can be an issue is when you fracture your spine, the bone itself, when you fracture it, it hurts like heck. And but what's even more dangerous is what's inside the spine, which is your spinal cord. If you have an injury to your spinal cord, which is gelatinous soft nerve tissue, you can end up paralyzed, and you can end up incontinent, and you can end up badly disabled. Like when they say paraplegic versus when they name the spinal cord level, that's what they mean. They're like, oh, this person from T4 and down is paralyzed and cannot have function of that nerve level. And then L2 at the lumbar spine, your control of your bowels are part of that part of that spinal cord function. I was not looking forward to that, so I checked myself down there, and I was like, okay, I didn't lose
Well,
continence.
yeah, that's always a good
No,
check.
Smells okay.
it was so we have the best place to actually check, right? Those very terminal nerve roots. We have sensation in what we call the saddle area. So if you're riding a horse, the part of your inner thighs and perineum and your bottom that contact the saddle, and if that part is intact, then you know that the lowest spinal roots are intact. So you tickled your happy area, is what
I
you're
did
saying.
not do that, Santosh. No.
Oh, good, good, good.
I feel like his brain, no matter how good a physician
Yeah,
he is, I
yeah.
feel like he may not have been focused on that particular physical examination in the moment.
There
Okay,
was
so
also
you
another
checked your
traveler
legs
right
and.
next to me. I didn't
Hmm.
want to do that in front of him. Um, and then
Okay,
also when I worked
so
at a
you
trauma
checked your
center,
toes and feet. Is that what you did, or?
correct. I just moved my toes and
Gotcha.
feet and was like, okay. And I touched my own kneecaps and was like, okay, there's no deficit in sensation here. Okay, so at least as of right now, I don't have any spinal cord damage or nerve damage, which I was very happy about.
But you are still lying flat on your back in the rain, miles from civilization, accessible only by raft.
Correct.
Yeah,
And yet,
and
I was able to get move a little bit and sit up and actually stand up temporarily. But as soon as I stood
okay.
up, the pain was searing and unbearable. And I was like, oh my God, now that I'm standing up, I
Oh,
cannot move a millimeter without screaming in pain.
and of course, that's going to be because you now have gravity exacerbating that injury with the rest of your body weight compressing down at the injured area.
Correct. And then I
okay.
was also worried that you could have a unstable spinal fracture, which means right now the spine is shattered in pieces, but it hasn't poked or pinched
J and
off the spinal
Santhosh.
cord. But as soon as you move and you put all your body weight on it, it could move on you and pinch off a piece of the spinal cord.
So that slow motion moment, if say you drop you watch those slow motion YouTube videos, and the water balloon pops and you have that moment before everything explodes outward, but it's fractured. That's basically what some part of your spine likely looked at, but you don't know how many pieces it's fractured or which direction they're going to go or if it will hold together.
So
Okay,
I
okay.
was scared, and in fact, I was probably more scared because I do this for a living, and I know what can happen if you make the wrong move or you don't get the right care.
Okay, so the first thing I'm thinking about, and probably what you're thinking about in terms of like field medicine, is before thinking about how to get better, there's two things, I guess: pain control, number one, and two, stabilizing the spine. So, this is what we talk about a lot in neck injuries because they're so dangerous, is that we put that big old collar on, and then we make sure that the neck does not move, because any fracture can suddenly compress the spine if you don't, if you move just the wrong way at right time. Same thing here with the lumbar spine. You're okay for now, but you don't want to get a piece of bone to all of a sudden come in and compress. So you had to find a way to like stabilize out there in the jungle. You had to find a way to kind of cast yourself, I guess.
Yeah, and I thought about it. I was like, well, the first thing that came to mind was like, wait a minute, what kind of predators are here in
Oh
Costa
God!
Rica?
I wasn't even thinking that.
Oh,
Oh God!
that's
Oh geez.
okay. So
I was
what
Yeah.
like,
kind of predators are there?
if I was definitely the slowest moving piece of meat now
Oh
amongst
God.
our travelers.
Okay.
Fortunately, there are jaguars, but they were not prevalent in that part of the jungle and that part of the river. And I
Okay.
think I was told that they were also more nocturnal. So this was in the middle of the day.
Oh, so
The other predator,
you've got a clock on this now.
I had a
Oh
clock on this,
God.
and I think that toucans and sloths were the most prevalent wild animals that people saw in that area. I was like,
Oh, dude, a sloth will mess you up.
you're
The
adorable, Santosh. I was
number
like,
of sloth injuries that I've taken care of. Josh, tell him about that sloth injury. Sorry.
if I get
It's
mauled to death by a
ongoing.
sloth,
It's-
if I get mauled to death by a sloth, I think I would have died happily. Um, but
Okay.
so I was thinking, okay, but then I was like, what about the elements? I can't be out here for indefinite amount of time. And then again, there's that issue of I mean, you have to extricate yourself out of that situation, and I guess you don't think about how important it is to walk on your with your own 2 feet until you don't have that ability. And all of a sudden, Mother Nature, just a minute ago, that looked so gorgeous, so serene, is like, oh my God, Mother Nature is going to kill me.
Oof.
That bitch.
Yeah.
So now we've gone from what sounds like a simple mechanical fall to also having to worry about wildlife, exposure, uh, and again, we're still talking about this as if it's just you casually out there. So we haven't mentioned your spouse. We haven't mentioned the rest of the expedition. Like, were you alone when you fell? Who witnessed it? What are the steps taken? Like, were you able to say, don't move me or move me in such and such a way? And again, it's not like, or were they carrying a cervical collar handy? Clearly, this
I'm
has a
guessing.
somewhat happy ending because here you are recording with us. Spoiler alert.
Uh, they most
Yeah.
certainly did not have any cervical collars. So my spouse went up ahead to look at the waterfall. It was just me and one other person who also thought that this was a bad idea to keep going because he said, "Hey, you know what? I think this is too slippery, and I don't want to get injured." So at least I had another person next to me. Fortunately, this was a one-way trail where you go see the waterfall and you come back out the exact same path. So I knew that they were going to come back in about 20 minutes. So when they did come back, just my luck. I don't know. I need to. Someone was watching out for me. Just my luck. The river guide is well trained in wilderness medicine, and that's what he said. He was like, actually, I'm trained in wilderness medicine,
Cool.
and one of our fellow travelers is a firefighter for a county here in California.
I feel
This
like
is
that's the lucky
awesome.
one. I'd be honestly more concerned if a field guide wasn't trained in wilderness medicine, at least for these kinds of expeditions.
Sure, that makes sense.
You
Yeah,
never
yeah,
know, Josh.
yeah.
True. This is not something we thought about a lot when we started traveling together, Ward.
Older and wiser now, I'm going to check.
Yeah.
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 So this person was actually trained in wilderness medicine, and he said, "Hey, you know what? We have to stabilize your spine and not have you walk and try to put you back on the raft. We were not going to
Okay.
put me back on the raft because that was not going to work." So
Oh, you
luckily
mean the river isn't calm and gentle enough to just act as a road?
It is
you
whitewater
have to get.
rafting.
Oh dear. Okay.
Classic.
Yeah.
Great stuff for a
Yeah.
spinal injury.
But the other thing is, you have to get upriver, right, to get back to your spot.
Correct. So fortunately, up the river there
Okay.
is a trail that's pretty rocky, but they can get a 4x4 down to that trail, and we just had to get me up the river through some really muddy and non-existing trails.
And this is where the coolest thing about wilderness medicine comes in is we call you the MacGyver of emergency medicine because of your many varied uses of duct tape as well as other solutions for things. So right before you tell us, you know, how you managed to get out, let's take a quick commercial break. See, I remembered it this time.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
When last we left, Dr. Ward,
But
stranded with a
yes.
broken back in the middle of the jungle, miles from civilization, having to get upriver without any supplies or care, only in the company of a firefighter, fellow traveler, and an emergency wilderness medicine trained guide. So let's talk about what did they do?
So to safely extricate a patient with a spine injury, you really have to have them preferably lay down. You don't necessarily have to have a stiff backboard, meaning a non-pliant backboard. The back is actually um, the back actually is held together by some pretty tough tissue. So you don't necessarily
Mhm.
have to be exactly on a. In the olden days, we used to use these stiff backboards. You don't have to have that, but you do have to minimize the movements. You can't be walking, bending, and walking on your own for these injuries.
Gotcha.
So the we went whitewater rafting, so we went with the equipments that we had. We all had life vests, and we all had oars to row the rafts with.
Or what?
So yeah, so we fashioned together a stretcher with 4 oars and like 5 life vests, and we put the oars on either side, and we strapped the life vests around the oars, and then they strapped me in the life vests. It's almost like I was in a seat belted, strapped in position.
Oh, so this
I'm
is like a.
picturing like the and you'll have to pardon me for the possibly insulting imagery, those pig on a spits that they like carry around,
Oh,
um
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
with you kind of hanging in the middle
no,
like where
no,
the pig would be.
Okay,
no,
yes,
but
that's a
not not
good
ha-
description.
not hanging upside down, but like on top.
Correct. So they used. So if they only had one oar on one side, that would have been the case, and that would have been terrible for my lumbar spine
Yeah.
because lumbar spine likes to have a natural curved, slight S shape, which
Okay.
means when standing, you are not hunched over. If I were in that pig position, were to be in that pig position, the lumbar spine would be in a hunched
The
over position, which would not be
the
great
wrong
for that.
curve. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So they put
Yeah.
me. So they put 2 oars on each side, and the middle is the vest. So I was actually very well supported, and my body weight, most of it was taken by my hips and my shoulders, um, placing my body weight on these two body parts and minimizing the weight on the spine. And fortunately, this was a active this was a very active group, so we were able to get volunteers to hoist me um, up on that pig on a stick situation. Except there were 2 sticks.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So these were people who could bear some weight, walk a ways, and so they had some strength, endurance, etc. It wasn't a bunch of couch potatoes in the middle of the jungle.
I
Correct.
also imagine though that there were rest stops. They're not just able to carry
Oh,
you
sure.
straight.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
as long as it wasn't every like 10 feet. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
And
uphill through the jungle on an
Yeah.
improvised stretcher, that's its
Oh,
own pretty
sure.
unique set of challenges. And this brings up one of the two biggest uh, two biggest principles of wilderness medical care: multifunctionality versus cross-functionality. So
Okay.
multifunctionality, although probably not designed like this, is equipment that can be used for more than one element of a patient's care. So, in this case,
Duct tape.
oars and duct tape and life vests can be turned into a stretcher, or, a intravenous set can double as like a cricothyroidotomy kit. Um, or so
Syringes
that
are so useful. Scalpels, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they can be used for one tool can be used for multiple things. Um,
And to be
versus
fair, you could probably make a tourniquet out of the life vest straps. You could probably make if you had a scalpel, you can make multiple. You can do an amputation. Not
well,
that you need
if
to.
Yeah.
if you had, God forbid, had a neck injury, a cervical collar can be improvised with a padded hip belt from a backpack,
Mhm.
blankets,
Okay.
and just rolled or closed foam padding,
Correct.
which I imagine would be present. At least one person on the expedition would have some form of those.
Yeah, the foam padding would have come from the vests, and they probably put the foam padding on either side of my neck and then taped me down that way.
Yeah.
Got
Just
it.
like you can use plastic garbage bags as improvised shelter, um, or as gloves,
Or
or
water.
canoe airbags can be converted into splints. And heck, even a suture kit can be made from just a healthy head of hair and, a needle. So
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
these are
actually a
not
technique where you can
these are
actually use the
not
hairs.
first choices, but when you are in remote wilderness locations, you don't always get your first, second, or even third choice. You work with what you got.
And you know what? It worked really well, actually. To be fair, I was very comfortable. I mean, I was scared because they were hoisting me above their heads, so I was 6 feet up in the air.
Oh. Oh, because
They,
they had to put the bars on their shoulders to carry you.
yeah, because there's no trail. And it's so narrow. The path is so narrow that if they tried to go any more wide, it would not be safe for them. They would have fallen off the side of the mountain. So they had
Oh
to
God.
keep me. Yeah,
Okay.
they had to single file walk up the mountain with me above their heads.
Okay.
This
All right.
this turned into a very different adventure travel trip for everybody.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad it's a happy story at the end. Spoiler alert. But this sounds terrifying for all involved.
I mean, to be fair, it gave me a new appreciation for emergency medical service personnel. I mean, I used to be a medic. I never had to do something like that, but medics
Sure.
do put their lives on the line when they go out to the field. When I worked with the fire department of New York, we went into some situations where it was urban situations, but the safety of our patient and the medics could not be guaranteed. And you really had to read the situation and say, okay, this is the best we can do. Let's extricate this person as safely as quickly as we can. And I'm
Yeah.
glad the gentlemen in Costa Rica were able to hoist me out of that riverbed onto the back of a of a Isuzu SUV. I
Yeah.
was never
Okay.
so happy to see an Isuzu.
Sure. Sure.
So, did you ride on the roof rack then?
No, no, no. The
Like
Isuzu had.
luggage?
Oh gosh, that would have been that. It was pouring, but they were able to put the seats down into a kind of a flatbed in the back, and they put me in that way.
Okay.
So then, with a stretcher that had not gone down in the truck, just purely out of academic interest, where did everybody else ride?
They did not need to put me in the stretcher. So again, we don't. The new thinking is you don't need to use. You don't really need to use backboards. You just need to minimize the movement of the back. You don't have to use the backboard all the time. So they were able to
Oh.
get me into the back
Okay.
of the Isuzu without using the stretcher. So once we got to the Isuzu, they unstrapped me and they were able to hoist me into the truck.
Got it.
But you're still
So as
laying flat. You're not sitting up on the
Correct.
seat the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So you're
Got it.
just
Got it. Got
staring
it.
up at all the other passengers, enjoying a lovely, awkward moment. for
Oh
the
no, they went
remainder of
back
the
to the
ride
river.
back?
No, they went back to
Okay.
the river. Yeah, so it was
They
just
what
me
now?
and
Oh, God.
because they had to raft themselves back to the original destination. Otherwise, the rafts were
Oh,
missing rowers, and you need a certain number of rowers to get back.
got
Oh,
it. Okay, got it.
but
Okay.
that is a tale for another time and another podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm eternally grateful for what they did, um, and then after an excruciating hour and a half of 4x4 rock crawling, we made it out of the jungle into the town, where I was able to
What?
go
So wait,
into an
what
ER.
was the pain control?
None.
Was
Oh,
there any?
I had two
Oh
ibuprofen. I
no.
had two ibuprofens with me, so I took two ibuprofens. So
Oh
that's not
no.
nothing. Actually, it did help.
Well, okay. Well, that's fair. I'm guessing they didn't have because they had everything that you're talking about, in terms of trying to stabilize you and all that kind of a thing. But there was no ice packs or anything like that to try to, symptomatically, give you some help for swelling. It was basically just whatever you had in your pocket.
Ice packs for spine would be pretty tough when you're in a supine position, because it would
Sure.
displace the area in the spine and cause a little unnatural curve.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
every other fracture, perfect, but for spine, it's generally not used. For ice to
Gotcha.
reach its effects, it would take a while, and I was just like, let's just get me to the hospital, please.
Got it.
Okay,
Okay.
so this is at least four. So the active half life that we deal with in the hospital is about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours on Tylenol, or ibuprofen.
hmm
So it sounds like you were going through this with longer than that time period.
I was about it was about like 3 to 4 hours. It took a while for me to be seen too. This was I will say that Costa Rica had some amazing doctors and facilities, but they're just like us. There aren't enough doctors to see every single patient within the minute they arrive. So I had to wait a little while, and by the time they did see me, I was sitting next to people who were pretty ill. The person next to me was getting a transfusion. Uh, two people, the two patients behind me, I heard a bunch of words in Spanish, which my Spanish is not that great, but I did understand COVID, and I understood operación. That person behind me needed to go to the operating room, so I was like, oh, okay, these are pretty ill people.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, yeah,
hmm
yeah. All
So
right.
I was definitely not the most ill person there, and but they took great care of me. It did take a while for everything to go through, but they gave me IV pain medications. They had me do the X-rays, and fortunately, the X-ray showed that I did not have a what we call a unstable fracture. So it's not a load-bearing fracture.
To kind of talk to your earlier point about how this no backboard is necessary, that kind of now dates back to around 2012. Although, correct me if you're more up to date on this, Ward. Uh, 2012, a Dr. Oswald from New Mexico released an article on biomechanics and pathophysiology of spinal injuries that basically says most of them are biomechanically stable, that the people who have unstable injuries already have spinal cord damage just as a result of the forces imparted during the injury, and pre hospital immobilization will not affect outcomes.
Yeah. So they're referring to in the olden days, and by that I mean like the 90s and 2000s. Um,
I just drank from the wrong grail.
Oh no.
I know not to insult you,
Yeah.
millennial gentlemen, but
Yeah.
in the olden days, we used to strap people onto the backboard if we thought they had a spinal injury, anywhere from the thoracic down to actually anywhere from the cervical down to lumbar spine, and we kept them on these hard backboards during transport and when we put them in the ER and during the workup in the ER. So it might end up being a few hours, and we noticed that patients are getting pressure sores from just being on these unforgiving flat hard backboards. So the trauma
but this,
surgeons started looking into it, and they said, you know what, is this really necessary? And apparently the expert consensus is that no, when you put them in the hospital, you can put them in a soft bed. When you're in the ambulance, you can put them in a soft bed. You don't necessarily have to keep them on a straight flat backboard unless there's a really good reason, like if you see that the person's pelvis is completely fractured and you have it's not even stable, the pelvis is loose, then you might have to consider the biomechanics of moving that person. But even then, you can use sheets and things like that to move a person without significantly moving their backboard or their spine.
oh, got it. Okay, so it doesn't have to be rigid all the time. Yeah,
Correct.
I'm glad we have this conversation because it's a very different in pediatrics because they're tiny humans. The mechanics of breaks are very, very different in non-rigid, non-calcified bones,
Hmm.
and you're not going to get pressure ulcers, and you can be a little bit more liberal with how you splint and keep them there. But I, like Josh, in terms of adult spine stabilization care, was in the Stone Ages.
So, as part of the at least 2017 spine management guide, which is what I read up on when preparing for this, because I wanted to see pictures of kind of what these sort of things would look like. The moving guidelines, for those of you who can't kind of imagine the stretcher bearers, gentle
Yes.
Stretcher
supported
bears.
gentle supported movements are safe. You avoid abrupt movement. You use small increments and avoid large unsupported movement. You avoid horizontal movement. Axial pulling and loading are fine. Um, and you firmly control the patient's weight center, head, shoulders, and hips at all times. So you move in a line, one weight center at a time, while supporting the others until, and while you are getting the patient onto the litter and then moving them. And there's
Interestingly,
a
the vests did a wonderful job of holding my shoulder and my pelvis.
And on our link in the further reading section of the show notes, there is not only a list of these descriptions, but a wide variety of pictures of different kinds of stretchers. And if you do see anything that looks familiar, Ward, feel free to comment on that because I don't think anybody took photos of you in this particular position.
I should have demanded one, and I should have demanded someone to feed me a grape or something
No.
while
Oh,
doing that.
that would have been good.
Yeah,
Feed
absolutely.
grapes in the jungle with a broken back. You now share something in common with Batman. And like Batman, who managed to recover and continue crime fighting, what happens to you? So, first off, what was it like being an emergency medicine patient, being on the other side, and in a foreign country, no less? Were you able to appreciate differences in technique across countries, or similarities, or were you a little bit more focused on your own situation, which would not be unexpected?
I was the worst. I was probably the worst. They do say doctors and nurses can make pretty difficult patients, and I was just in so much pain. I was screaming when I was in pain. I was screaming when I moved, and fortunately, culturally, I felt like people were so kind. In fact, they couldn't find a like supine bed for me because it was so crowded, and I was in so much pain that one a very ill looking person said, "Hey, just take my bed."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I
Don't
was like, "Oh my
don't
gosh."
mind my tuberculosis, just or my
Exactly.
COVID. Let me just roll off here. You take this.
In fact,
Sure.
that's what I think he had. If that COVID person might have been him, but you know what? I was in no position to turn down a bed, and it was
Wow.
just people were so
Okay.
kind,
Okay.
and uh, you know the wait times out in that jungle hospital. This we're still in the jungle province. They were long, and the waiting rooms were pretty full, but I don't know. There was just the sense of community out there was I felt a little bit stronger than what I've been seeing in my in on my job in American ERs. There just seems to be a little bit more aggressiveness, or I don't know, just hostility in our healthcare setting that especially that got magnified after COVID because resources
Sure.
got stretched and tensions ran high. So they fortunately didn't have that.
Well, I guess they've been working with stretched resources for quite some time, which is not uncommon for an emergency room in general, regardless of country, I would think.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they took great care of me, and I couldn't be happier.
So, did you end up requiring any surgery, or tell us about your recovery? As where are you? How has it been going?
So I fractured the transverse processes of my lumbar spine in L2 and L3, so the Macarena bones. And the transverse processes are the projections off the spine itself. And it's not part of the load bearing part on the axial load or the weight bearing load, but it is where all the stabilizing muscles and ligaments attach to. So when we turn, when we stand up, that's how we stabilize our back. And when they are fractured, every time you turn, these ligaments get pulled, and it felt like I had crunch, crunch, crunch every time I moved in my back,
Ooh,
and it was
wow.
excruciating. And the
Okay.
treatment for that is to temporarily stabilize it with a TLSO brace. So you wear it looks like a Ninja Turtle brace, so it looks like I'm a turtle, and
Oh, you like a shell.
like a shell. Well, in the
Okay.
olden days, it was a shell. Now they just stabilize it with the straps that keep the pressure points in place, but the body of the shell is hollow.
Okay, got
So
it.
I wore that for quite a few weeks. You're supposed to wear it for 6 weeks. I was stubborn. I was like, after week 3, I was like, you know what? I don't want to wear that anymore.
Oh no.
Ah, there we go. There's the doctor patient.
I know.
Yeah, that's right there is in a nutshell why we are just trash patients. We're so bad.
I was
Yeah.
that trashy patient. To be fair, though, you do the whole purpose of that is to help you with pain control and for you to regain movement. Eventually, the treatment is for you to strengthen your core and get back into moving as soon as
Okay.
possible. So, and also, speaking of resource poor, California cannot afford to. I don't want to. Cannot afford to have their healthcare workers be out of commission for a long time, and I had to get back to work.
Sure.
Even our department and they needed me there. So I was like, okay, well, I can't be wearing
How
this
long you
all the
gonna have
time.
a broken back, Dr. Ward?
I went back to work after I only missed a shift and a half. So I will say that.
Whoa, okay. So
Yeah,
wait, you went back to work with this like
I
in this
did.
brace.
I did. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I
Okay.
told him, look, I'm not doing CPR in that brace,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
lift anybody in that brace. But I did have to
Right.
go back to work. I didn't have to, but
Okay.
I chose to go back to work because I didn't want to burn all my sick days.
Because
Okay.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism. Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
we've mentioned a couple times TLSO brace, so it does look like a turtle shell, but just for the listening audience at home, what does that stand for? Thoraco, thoracic,
Thoraco
lumbar, spinal. O? What's the O?
orthotic.
Thoracolumbar, the longest part of your spine is the thoracic and lumbar section. Cervical and sacral make up very few of the spinal bones. So TL supporting your thoracic and lumbar spine orthotic brace.
Yeah. I mean, just looking through some of the products that they have online, if it wasn't like a body brace and I didn't know the purpose of it, this looks like body armor, like badass,
Uh,
futuristic, like,
it
you know.
looks for those of you listening at home, knowing my audience,
Yeah.
like Comic-Con cosplay.
Yeah, it really does. And they actually trick it out with some cool colors and stuff. But the way it straps around the body, it looks like either the type of armor that you'd put on, in a futuristic, like, I gotta go strap this on and hone my vibro blade and fight in the gladiatorial arena, or it would be one of those like packs that you'd put on where you could put this thing on and then attach a bunch of like attachments like extra arms like Dr. Octopus or something like that.
Well, it was armor, and it served that purpose because when you lay down with a with a spinal fracture, um,
Yeah,
even the softest well, actually, the softest beds are the worst. In fact,
sure.
but
Oh,
even
got it, got it,
even when
got
a
it.
mattress pushes on that fractured piece, it feels like hell. So,
Oh wow.
so what that armor does, it evenly distributes that pressure into the entire spine, so that it's not pushing on that one fractured piece.
So you wore this even like everywhere. Like you'd take it off to shower, but then you'd
Correct.
wear this to sleep.
You're supposed to wear it to sleep. Again, terrible
Okay.
patient, and I was
Oh
like,
no,
oh.
Lord. Oh god. So wait, do you
Because
have that 40-plus-year-old permanent limp now? kind
no.
of.
Thank goodness to modern medical care.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm getting back into running, and I'm getting back into yoga, and I have almost full range of what I could do before, except the deconditioning that happened during the 6 weeks of um, relative immobilization.
The having to sit
So
in the brace.
yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
your body breaks down pretty quickly, and you lose strength and mobility pretty quickly when you don't do anything.
Okay. So how did you start to I'm not gonna I usually say when you were allowed to rehab, but you took off whenever the hell you wanted to. But did you have specific rehab that you followed in terms of a program with a physical therapist, or did you look online, or did you use standard exercises with weights or stretching? Like what did you do to start to get back?
Again, I don't recommend this, but I'm supposed to.
Okay.
I was supposed to follow up with my physical therapist
Uh-huh.
3 weeks ago,
Oh,
and
jeez. You're killing us. You're killing us here,
but
You're
I've been
Ward.
killing
watching.
us, Ward.
I've
So
been
wait a minute.
watching Only Murders in the Building on my
I,
couch,
I want to
and
go start to finish. The EMT trained emergency physician with a background in extensive travel, number one, went out into the wilderness without knowing if they had any kind of supplies or recovery in case anything happened. Um, was kind of at the mercy of his friends and group when he was out in the jungle, only carried a couple of Motrins with him in his survival pack. And then when he got home, followed none of the medical advice he was supposed to follow.
I followed
It's
most
like
of the medical
it's like
advice.
you never even hosted the show with us.
Just, I mean, this was like wire to wire
Well, okay, no. Rebuttal
non-compliance.
time. Rebuttal time. That's rebuttal time. No. Okay, so I did follow all the medical advice. Maybe not to the
Okay.
T, but
Okay.
I actually did what I was supposed to do. You take off the brace when you're ready.
Okay.
It's up
Okay.
to
Got it.
6 weeks, and then yeah, physical therapy is much preferred, but capitalism. I got to work. I on my downtime, I just didn't have any extra time, and I was doing. I'm doing a lot better now, so I'm really happy about my progress. And
Okay.
in terms
So
of
you
taking
you
stuff
did
with you on
work
the
out
road,
in order to strengthen your core. It just wasn't a specific PT recommended thing, but
right?
there,
So I
I know
took
you're a
walks. I
fitness
took yeah
person, so
yeah
yeah.
I took walks and things like that, and also to the point of carrying supplies when you travel. I've traveled extensively with Dr. J, and actually, have we traveled together, Santosh, abroad? Maybe not yet.
We did one road trip together.
That's right.
If you remember, all the way back at the end of
That's
medical
right.
school.
I will say this: we will never be able to take all the supplies for all the situations, and
That's true. Yes.
the best thing you can do is go with people you trust and keep a good head on your shoulders and be thoughtful about your choices, and that is what I think gives you the best chance of having a good outcome. I was not going to carry a turtle brace out to Costa Rica,
No, no,
or
no,
narcotic meds or anything like that.
no, nothing like that. But
maybe
because
maybe more than 2 Tylenol might have been
yeah,
advised.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Fair
yeah.
point. But I'm telling you,
A few things.
trust the folks. Go with trustworthy folks around you, and the
Which
rest is not
I believe we called the accountability system.
correct. That
Yes,
is
yeah.
probably the safest system you can do, and the rest is unfortunately not up to you and me. It's up to Mother Nature, God, whoever you believe in.
Sure. I will say one thing, and I don't know if you maybe omitted this and you did have this, so please do forgive me. But a simple, you pick up at a department store first aid kit, maybe 12 inches by 8 inches type of a thing that can fit in a backpack. That's kind of a nice thing to have because usually that has a little, over the counter painkillers in there, a couple of things to splint small injuries with, bandages, a few antiseptics in case you suffer a bad or contaminated cut. So that actually would have been a good thing. It definitely wouldn't have saved your back then and
I did
there.
no, Santosh. I
But,
did
No,
have
and
that,
oh, you
except
did?
on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
raft, you're not allowed to take. You're only allowed to take a small. You're not even allowed to take a backpack. Really, you're only allowed to take
Oh,
a
because
very
of
small.
weight. I
Correct.
see. Got it. Got it.
So
Okay, so this was
nothing on the
this was
raft.
really the worst possible situation for a back break.
But that's life for you. Sometimes things like that happens.
you
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
everything right and still be at the mercy of fate.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. No, no, that's the things that we're told even over and over in patient care, and then I guess it translates to our own lives as well. But I thought because we were doctors, we were special, but
Well,
guess not.
Ward, first and foremost, we are so happy that you are safe and back, and that things did not take you know worse of a turn than they already did.
I do have to say, for all the talk of like middle age and all this kind of a thing, anybody could have taken a fall like this at any age. You did recover with, pretty good speed, I would say. It sounds like to me from this particular fall. And mocking aside that I did earlier, you really did follow the bulk of your recommendations to allow your bones to heal up and everything. It sounds like you're back to yourself. So that's, not so middle age after all, sir.
And also being on the other side of being on the patient side of wilderness medicine or travel medicine stinks. So I
Oh
think
no.
when we tell our listeners, hey, stay out of you know use information to stay out of the hospital or the ER, is probably
Yes.
that ounce of prevention is worth its weight in gold, if not more.
Yeah. Despite what everybody in the capitalistic world thinks, we don't want more volume in the hospital.
No, no, we're good.
Yeah.
We're
We're
very good with the
so
amount of
good.
volume. I don't even
Yeah.
know what the current volume is. I'm good with it.
Yeah. Whatever
Ditto.
it is, we want to prevent illness, infection, trauma, and keep you guys safe at home rather than coming into the hospital.
I want to see patient numbers dropping faster than Twitter stock.
And those of us who are outpatient, we want to see you come to the clinic a little bit more often in anticipation of. So, doing things like travel medicine, getting your shots ahead of time, recommendations for travel, and keeping yourself safe so that you never have to come around in the first place to the ER, urgent care, or hospital. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it for this week. As always, we love to hear your comments and questions. If you'd like to support us spiritually, emotionally, or financially, links to do that are in the show notes, along with links for further reading, largely pictures about different spine management things.
Yeah.
Our
Although that was a good website, Josh, the Wild Med Center. Yeah,
yeah,
I hope that helps people.
I
our
approve.
theme
Yeah, good
music
information.
Our theme music is composed by Rachel Leisure. The show is produced by me with a lot of help from Dr. Santhosh and friends. And until next time, keep a song in your heart, soap on your hands, a shot in your arm, more than 2 ibuprofen on you.
I feel shamed.
No, no, no.
And
Poor guy.
safety, for safety.
For safety, yeah.
Um,
True.
and until next time, as always, happy and safe travels.
Bye, everybody.